Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about racial skills, and specifically, where the hell racial skills should be. What should they be in Guild Wars 2? This isn't a particularly new discussion, but it is a very topical one at the moment for two main reasons. Number one, the large changes to build making that occurred with the game back around the Lion's Arch updates earlier this year, as well as, of course, Heart of Thorns and raids. We're seeing a lot more place for a lot more skills in the game now, and racial skills are a big outlier. So, what's the deal with them? Well, the first thing you should understand about racial skills in Guild Wars 2 right now is the devs basically don't want you using them for any kind of quote-unquote real content. They are deliberately tuned to be mechanically weaker than their profession-based counterparts. So a really good example of this is the char-based racial skill, an ability only char characters can use, Battle Roar. Now, this thing gives you 2 stacks of might and a bit of fury on a fairly short duration, while warriors have an incredibly similar skill for Great Justice, which just about in every single way is better. This is a really good way of highlighting the fact that ArenaNet did try to make the racial skills weaker than professions, and they did this for a very good reason. They did this to stop us waiting around to have fun. What do I mean by that? Well, this was a big thing that ArenaNet had their eyes on going into Guild Wars 2. The first game, you tended to need very specific players for very specific team compositions to get into a lot of their party-based, group-based content. And so if you didn't have that specific monk to allow you to get through the content, you just had to wait a lot. This was one of the biggest reasons that ArenaNet tried to move away from such a hard holy trinity and designed many of their classes to be able to fill many of the available roles, so that there was less of this situation where in order to play content, you were being discriminated against based on decisions you made way back at character creation. And so the idea of having powerful or useful racial skills completely stands outside of that. You'd have a situation where, say, you are a warrior with perfect, brilliant gear and you know exactly how the content works, but because you're not a non-warrior and you don't have access to bear form, unfortunately, people don't want to run with you because you can't get through the content quick enough, or at all. This is actually why bear form, which was seeing some unintended use in dungeons a while back, was actually nerfed. These things have always been called out very quickly by the devs. And so then it's kind of a bad sign, maybe, that now that raids are out, this is exactly the situation we're in. If there's one place in the game that I'm sure ArenaNet don't want racial skill discrimination, it's when you're trying to form a 10-man party for super difficult raids where your making or breaking of a run can actually depend on your race. And you might think, oh, Wooden Potatoes, you're overreacting, but I'm actually not. That's why this is a bit topical at the moment. The second boss of this first wing of the raid, the second boss we've ever seen for raids in Guild Wars 2 at all, actually does have a lot to do with racial skills. Specifically 2 of them. Sylvari and humans are great in this encounter. Why? When you get the boss to about 33% health or 66% health, he becomes invulnerable and 4 enemies spawn around him, which are going to slowly walk into him. If a single one reaches him, the game's over. The only ways that you can slow them down are through chills, cripples, and immobilizes. And as it so happens, Sylvari, regardless of their profession, if you're a Sylvari, you have an incredibly powerful, long-lasting immobilize skill always at your disposal. Further, if you're a human character, you can make use of the very rarely seen Oakheart skill and summon a basically super OP, extra long duration version of the Ranger elite skill, Tangling Roots, and have someone immobed for ages there. Pair this, say, with Chronomancers, who can mimic the Sylvari racial. You see, we're in a pretty interesting situation. So, I've talked a little bit about the downsides of these things having a place, and I guess the first answer and the lazy answer, the immediate thing ArenaNet will definitely go to, is to nerf them down. But I do want to talk a little bit about the upsides, because one of my favorite things in Heart of Thorns, and one of my favorite things to discover while trying to defeat this second boss, was the usage of these racial skills. Running around regular Heart of Thorns areas with the skill Technobabble to smash through break bars has been thrilling for me. I want to see these skills have a place, and whenever they do have a place, I think it's pretty fantastic. To see in the Gorseable fight a friggin' human turning into an oak heart to help out the battle definitely has some merit. It put more of a smile on my face than discovering other regular skills had some place, right? I mean, how many Norn players out there in PvE can genuinely tell me they're not disappointed their identity as a Norn, as something that can transform at will, is basically never used in Guild Wars 2. For those of us playing Guild Wars 1, half the reason we even wanted to play a Norn was the idea we'd transform a lot, and just none of the players ever do. My argument is that these skills, when they are deliberately balanced to be worse than profession counterparts, so basically nobody uses them, makes it so they may as well not be in the game. It removes a big part of our identity with the race we're playing, and I don't think we're in an ideal situation. Today, I want to talk about my solution for the problem, because I think it's very simple. I think it's very easy to implement, and ArenaNet, funnily enough, this is the cool thing, have already put themselves about 90% of the way there. So how do we do it? Well, with all the new fancy UI they added with the Lion's Arch update. On the screen right now, you can see the results of about half an hour's worth of Photoshop. This is a hero panel under my proposal. You'd have your skills that you can train as normal, you'd have your specializations that you can train as normal, your elite specialization, but then you just simply add a new section called racial skills. And what this would mean is, let's say I'm a Sylvari player right now, I would probably start with my Sylvari skills, just as you currently do in the game. They're already unlocked and free to go. But as I continue to level and get hero points, I can spend them, well, here, training other racial skills. It's no big secret in the community right now, especially after the nerfs to their original implementation of elite specializations and hero points, that there are a ton of excess hero points in Guild Wars 2 right now. Well, these can easily be spent on racial training. So we've got human training, Norn training, Char training, Sylvan training, and Asuran. And all this would do, quite simply, just as the skills UI does, is unlock your Asuran skills. So I'm Sylvari training this. First I get Technobabble, then I get Pain Inverter, Radiation Field, and then we end with the elites, the 2 golems and the battle suit. And in this way, it doesn't actually matter what race you are, you get access to all of the racial skills, the discrimination doesn't occur, and these things can actually be balanced to suits. Suddenly we have power suits that people actually want to climb in. Can you imagine? This isn't the whole solution though. And specifically, one thing might come to your attention, and that's that if we train all these Asuran skills, right, then that's 6 skills that appear when we're trying to choose utilities. Well, then we train Sylvari and another 6 get thrown in, and we train Char and there's another 6, and then and suddenly things are getting very bloated. Suddenly the UI doesn't really work. So what I'd actually recommend is not only using the new training UI, but you also use the new specialization system. Instead of having a single character that any moment has access to all the skills and it's got this huge spreadsheet worth of skills that you can click on the UI, you just ask someone to specialize with a certain race. So here's my concept here. Again, just a little while in Photoshop. Here we have my Elementalist, who is fire attuned. If we were to say, perhaps scroll up on this scroll bar here, which I've added in, you would see that they were also earth attuned. So we would be like earth, fire, air, and then you just get your 4th specialization now. Similar to how elite specializations have a gold trim that you can put in that slot, you can have a trim for the bottom slot, and this is the one slot you'd get to choose your race. The racial specialization doesn't have to be anything fancy. In fact, the UI works far too perfectly, in my opinion. Here we've gone with Norn, so we get a nice fancy looking Norn background, and each one of these blips represents one of the Norn skills that we unlock. How many Norn skills are there, Wooden Potatoes? Oh, 6. How many things are on this UI exactly? 6. It really is that basic. While we have this available, up on the UI, we would have non-skills we can choose. It's a bit of a mistake on what I photoshopped here with the Asura skills still up here. Perhaps these would be taken away. And really, there doesn't have to be any more effort put in than that. Of course, you can go fancy and you can decide that, you know, the Norn specialization actually has some Norn traits with it, and the Norn traits give you more damage in the Shiver Peaks and crazy stuff like that. But that's beyond the scope of what I'm trying to recommend, really. That's beyond all of that. To put it bluntly, I believe the solution for this problem is simply racial specializations. Powerful, useful, worthwhile racial skills across the board. Everybody can use them, but there's still an element of build making and identity because you only get one specialization at any one time. There is another problem though, and this probably will have occurred to some of you. It doesn't make much sense that my Asura here will be able to transform into the bear. What, my tiny little Asura is going to become a giant bear? Doesn't that detract a little from being a Norn? Doesn't the flavor that it once gave specifically Norn now get completely invalidated because any race can have it? I mean, who cares if the perk is you start with it unlocked when we're going to spend most of our time in this game playing at level 80? That's a fair point. And so what I would bring your attention back to is the fact that these are about flavor. And so you can mechanically allow an Asura to become the bear, to get the skills, and mechanically have a place, but reserve that flavorful physical transformation just to the Norn. And so, again, I just mocked up a very basic image here. This is a theoretical Asura who's Norn specialized and has popped to become the bear. And oh look, we have all of our bear skills. We're totally fine. We're in the transformation. It's mechanically identical. People can look on our bar to see that we are the bear, but we actually don't look physically like one. And this isn't actually a totally new concept to the game at all. Think about humans. Back in Guild Wars 1, we also turned into the bear. There's even lore precedent for this. And rather than physically transforming into one, because the humans couldn't, we simply got like a buff on our bar. Why couldn't that happen for any of the other races? We could go vice versa. A Norn trying to channel Melanju and become an Oakheart. Exact same situation. You mechanically change, but physically you do not have to. That is reserved specifically for the humans out there. Skills like Become the Bear, that I've done all this discussion on, actually aren't that common, so it shouldn't be something we have to think about too much. But for those who really want to preserve that identity of getting something special because of your race, you can absolutely play around with things. For example, the human skill Prayer to Lyssa. This thing's pretty much terrible and you'd never use. We can imagine it would be balanced to be something much more fun, but the voice-acted lines would only continue to be playing when cast by a human rather than the other races. I took this screenshot in PvP for a very specific reason, and that's because a lot of you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't work for PvP, because Asura are clearly going to become the bear, because it's less obvious that they're in this super OP mode. But ArenaNet already fixed that too with standardized enemy models. It doesn't need to go much further than, say, an icon we get when we kill the Svanir or Chieftain, something that ArenaNet already feel is perfectly appropriate for the game, for this to work there too. But again, this doesn't have to be a system that introduces racial skills to PvP. It doesn't even have to go that far. All we need is a simple way through the UI to allow anyone to use the other racial skills, and then they can actually be part of a game. That theoretical Reaper of Grenth human elite skill build could become a thing. Sylvari summoning their druids could be a thing. Charzukas could be a thing. And the Norn may finally get to feel good about running around in their transforms. So anyway, that was just an idea. It's been something I've been thinking about a lot. It really does surprise me how easily this can get thrown in. We have excess hero points. All the UI is already there. What more do we need? Well, anyway, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. Am I crazy? Am I missing something massive? We'll have to see. But thanks very much for listening, guys. It means an awful lot. I'll see you next time. Oh, and while they're at it, they could give them to Red.